Minister, the recent ERSI report, headline Poverty Target Reduction in Ireland and the Role of Work and Social Welfare, found that lone parents and working age adults with disabilities experience distinctively high rates of income poverty, deprivation and consistent poverty. In light of that, yesterday the Social Democrats had a motion calling for action on the cost of disability, and today I want to highlight the needs of lone parents who are being overwhelmed by the cost of childcare. I'll leave that for now.
Thank you very much, Deputy Kearns. Significant investment is being allocated by government to support families, including one-parent families, with the cost of early learning and childcare. And under the Early Childhood Care and Education Scheme, ECCE, all children are supported to access up to 2 years of preschool education without cost, and 95% of eligible children are availing of this programme. But perhaps more usefully, the National Childcare Scheme, the NCS, is supporting thousands of families to offset their early learning and childcare costs. We undertook a review of the NCS, and that was published late last year, and it showed that of families using it, 38% of families had more than half of their early learning and childcare costs covered by the NCS. 56% of families had more money to spend due to the NCS scheme, and 28% of families were working more because of the NCS, with 8% reporting that they would not be in work without the NCS. Single parents working part-time or not working were most likely to report that they were using paid early learning and childcare or using more hours of early learning and childcare because of the NCS. That was around half of one-parent families who responded. The greatest perceived impacts on work were reported by single parents, with almost 2/3 of single parents working part-time and almost half of single parents working full-time, reporting that they were either working or working more because of the NCS. And single parents working full-time were most likely to report that the NCS had had a positive impact on family finances. A quarter reported that they had more money to spend because of the scheme, while a further half reported that they had slightly more money to spend. And that review of the NCS that I've just discussed, that was undertaken before the introduction of enhancements that I announced in last year's budget. So they, I believe, will have improved the situation further. But I do recognise that the burden of early learning and childcare remains too high, and we do need to do more to support all families, including one-parent families. And in this context, I've signalled that I will be prioritising further investment in the NCS in Budget 23, with a focus on substantially improving affordability for families.
Minister, the Children's Committee discussion of child poverty was quite harrowing. We heard how the lack of supports for lone parents was a major driver of deprivation. Exorbitant childcare costs means in many families it's more economic for a parent to stop working or reduce their working hours, and that's primarily the mother. However, for one-parent families, this leaves them no choice but to limit their employment altogether, and this cohort, again, primarily younger women, need more tailored support. And instead, at the moment, they're being overlooked. At the committee, groups like St Vincent de Paul and One Family highlighted issues around the cliff edge for working lone parents due to the arbitrary cut-offs for the job seekers' transition payment. Education pathways and grants can be equally restrictive, and I 100% recognise that a lot of these issues relate to other departments other than yours, but it's children who ultimately suffer. So as Minister for Children, I was wondering what steps can you take to support lone parent families in the very unique challenges that they face?
Thank you, Deputy. In terms of the specific issue of childcare, which is directly within my control, as I say, we have demonstrated through the research that the NCS is delivering specifically for one-parent families. Since that report is done, we removed the deduction of wraparound hours for children whose parents aren't in work or further education. That will benefit about 5,000 young children, probably some of the young children at most at risk of poverty. So that's a significant innovation. We actually brought that in May of this year. We were able to bring it in early. I've said before, we're looking to invest more money into the NCS this year, and that will again, I think, benefit more one-parent families. But I take your point in terms of the wider measures, and particularly measures in the area of social protection. I engage with Minister Humphreys on these issues as part of the pre-budget process, and I'll be doing so again in this year's pre-budget process.
Thanks. Yeah, I suppose ultimately comes back to the need for quality, accessible early years and school-age childcare, and The privatisation and neoliberal model is failing everybody, children, families and workers in the sector. While I recognise the changes brought in, I have to point out that they weren't sufficiently targeted for those most disadvantaged under the current system. Lone parents, families of a child with disabilities and other need specialised supports and an integrated approach with other departments. The only way that can happen is by working with the representative organisations and advocates in advance of the budget. They need a commitment from you that you will engage and listen to those bodies and lone parents who experience poverty due to state policies.
Thanks, Deputy. I disagree with you slightly on the targeting point, particularly in terms of the removal of wraparound hours. That absolutely targets the most vulnerable children. These are children whose parents aren't in work and study, and that change was a direct response to advocacy that I'd received from a range of representative groups across the early learning and care sector, particularly the community sector, particularly in communities where there'd been particular advocacy, and I think that was a change that they welcomed. I know in terms of other departments there were a range of changes made across the last two budgets in terms of the working family payment, in terms of the one parent family payment, and in terms of increases to the qualified child, the IQC, all welcome. We do need to continue to do more, and that will certainly be part of our advocacy. And I think, you know, even in terms of the announcement by Minister Foley and Minister McGrath this week in terms of additional support for back to school, that again is benefiting those children who need that support the most.
With agreement of the House, I propose we go back to question 86 and